Well, hi again, everybody. Welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football, and this is the Sports Page with Bob Case. I'm Harper LaBelle, and along with Bob and a special guest that we have today, Jim Hughes, we are going to talk about the major leagues. One more time, we're going to go down memory lane with Jim. We're talking about his big league career, obviously his high school days, collegiately, and bypassing that, going straight into the draft and becoming a major league pitcher. But this will be fascinating for some of you guys that really enjoy some of the gear that's a part of baseball, the balls themselves, the gloves, the bats, catcher's equipment, all kinds of gear that's all branded to the same name, which is Rawlings. And Jim was a vice president with Rawlings. We're going to talk about his professional career and his professional career after his professional career, both with the major leagues and obviously with Rawlings as the professional baseball vice president of operations. So we appreciate him being on. And Bob, obviously, you invite friends, people that are like family to you. And Jim is obviously a part of that. And he had a great career in the major leagues, but also befriended you from an equipment side. You get to see the player and also the guy that can get all the gear that you need to make everybody happy when they're in the clubhouse.
Yeah, Harper, it's great to have Jim on here, and I think he'll be a very fascinating and interesting guest. And I've been fortunate to know Jim. I had first met Jim. When he was with the Twins. I was working with some of his teammates, a guy named Tom Johnson, a guy named Craig Cusick, and Tony Oliva, and Carew. And I'd met him back then, but we became really good friends right about the time he retired, and he was working for Rawlings. And he's been an A-list friend for years, and we've had so many laughs and good times together over years and years about. And, I want to just say one thing. This is another connection Jim and I had. Don McMahon, who pitched 17 years in the big leagues, was a great relief pitcher, played in 2 World Series championships teams, the Detroit Tigers in 1968, and he played with the Milwaukee Braves in 57, had 2 World Series rings. And he was a dear, dear friend of mine, and he was a dear, dear friend of Jim's, and Jim will elaborate on how he got him, was a big break in his life. But I want to tell the story about one of the saddest days of my life, and it has to do with Don McMahon. I drove in to Dodger Stadium. It was in August of 1987, and I parked in the Dodger parking lot, and Don pulled up in his Volvo right next to me, parked his Volvo, got out of the car, gave me a hug. Hey, Bob, how you doing? He says, man, I've been eating too much of this free Italian food they give Lasorda. I'm gaining some weight. I got to lose some weight. And so, we laughed and we walked in the ballpark together, and his Volvo was parked right next to my car. And fast forward, this is before the gates open. This is like at 4 PM. I'm sitting in the dugout, and Don McMahon is pitching batting practice, which he did for years. All of a sudden, he steps off the mound and kind of wobbled around, and he got up and passed out right where the batter's circle is. And they were giving him mouth to mouth, and everybody's pumping his chest. He died pitching batting practice. He died right in front of my eyes. And I'd just been talking to him a half hour before, kidding about losing weight from eating all the Lasorda's pasta. And so that will always stick with me, because he was everybody loved Don. He was an Irish guy, big, strong guy, and he loved to work out and pitch batting practice, and he helped all the players. But I will never forget, he grew up in Brooklyn, and Al Davis, the owner of the Raiders, was Don's best friend growing up. And Al gave him a scouting job for the Raiders for his whole life. Don McMahon was a football scout for the Oakland Raiders, or the LA Raiders. And I'll never forget that night in the club level, Al Davis was there crying like a baby. Al Davis was crying that night. And it was this thought I left. It was like 1 AM. We were all up there talking about Don up on the club level. And I went out to my car with my buddy, and we walked out to the parking lot. There was my car, and the parking lot was empty. It was 1 AM, and there was his Volvo.
Wow.
With fog on the windows, from the mildew, from the dew. And I remember looking at that Volvo and saying, who would have believed when he got out of that car that side of that car alone in the parking lot will stay with me forever. Anyway, I just wanted to say that about Don McMahon, and Jim will tell you what a great guy he was and what a great friend he was. And I'm so anxious to hear about Jim's. I always call Jim, he had a great career, but he had an injury. But I always refer to him when I call him, I'm looking for the 16-game winner, because he won 16 games when his stuff, and he had 13 complete games. He had a really great year, and but then, he was never the same after his injury, but he'll tell you all about that. But Jim, I'm waiting to hear all these stories, and looking forward to it, because you've really had an interesting, fun-filled life, and you're just a dear A-list friend. So go.
Well, thank you, Bob. And thanks, Harper. Let me go back real quick and say, in baseball, no matter what it is, Harper and your business, Bob, everything you've done, there are guys that love what they do and more, so far above other guys. But Don McMahon, I think, loved baseball more than anybody that I've ever met in my life. And that he would throw batting practice. He would catch in the bullpen by sitting down on home plate with his first baseman's mitt, and just love every single minute of it. If a guy wanted to catch or throw pitching practice, Don would sit there with him for hours till he's done. So anyway, great guy, Bob. You hit it right on the nose.
Well, it's interesting, Jim. We want to start on a bad note, but obviously losing somebody who is so influential in you, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. But if I didn't know anything about Don, and we talked a little bit about him before the show started, but if I'm just a viewer, tell me something about him. Other than, yes, he loved baseball, but give me a little bit of his past. That here's what made him so special with me in terms of my knowledge of him as the human being, not the baseball batting practice thrower, but just what are some of the traits and characteristics that really set Don uniquely apart?
The one that sets in is he cared. He cared about every player. He cared about every friend. He was a great father. All his son Jackie, the rest of his family. He was a good family man. That's what you can say about him. He really cared. And like I said, if I called Mac at 2:00 in the morning and said, "Hey, I need you to come over and give me a ride," he's the type of guy that would do that. And just the fact that we played on the same team all those years, and you saw him every single day. All 25, 26 guys on that team, probably including the pitching staff, thought the same thing about him. He was always there, great personality, loved to laugh. And, that was Don. But more than it, and he was a good teacher, too. He was definitely a good teacher.
Yeah, obviously.
How about a 17-year major league career?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. He was so humble, and he was fun to talk about that. But, in ways, as great as his career was, and I don't even mean to take anything away from him, because he had a great career, but he was such a good person.
Absolutely.
You hear that all the time when somebody passes. Well, God, he had a great career, but he was a better person than he was a baseball player. Well, he was both. He was a great player, and he was a great man.
And baseball certainly misses him. Obviously, his love of the game and making sure that the legacy of it got to continue, and his small but yet significant part of it made him very unique in many ways to both of you.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about your career. Jim, growing up in Los Angeles, St. Bernard's High School, I always try to begin at the high school level, because that's when most guys realize that they may have what it takes to get to that next level. Was it wiffle ball for you, or just playing with a tennis ball out in the street with a bunch of guys in the neighborhood? I mean, when did baseball become something that you not only loved to do, but wanted to get better at?
As early as I can remember, it was my brother, who was 4 years older, had a tennis ball against the garage, wiffle ball, the whole area, going up to the local schools and playing over the line, which a lot of these kids don't. It's a different over the line nowadays. But, baseball constantly. And, even during the summer when you're young, you used to say to your mom, "What time's dinner?" If it was 9:00 in the morning, you'd say, "What time's dinner?" She'd say 5:00. You were gone all day somewhere playing, mostly baseball, mix in a little basketball and other things there. But that was it. And it was very competitive. Even at that age, for the longest time, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it, was a dice baseball game. It was called APBA baseball. And we would go crazy on that. And I had a group of friends, which I still see to this day, that were so competitive. You even hated losing in that. And, arguments in the front, that was a strike. No, it wasn't, but it was a lot of fun. And so that's where I would say my love of baseball started.
And Jim, having an older brother, I'm sure there wasn't a competitive streak in you at all. So, shame on me for even thinking this, but you always wanted to beat him, and catch up, and always wanted to be hanging out with his buddies. Not that you didn't like to be your own, but I can do this. And you got better because you were looking up at guys that are 2, 3, 4 years older than you, maybe even 5. And I've got to get it at a better level in order to be, I don't want to be the last guy picked when I'm playing on my brother's team.
Oh, 100%. I've always said my brother was at such a disadvantage because if I beat him, which I hardly ever did, it was awesome. But if he beat me, it was supposed to be. So
Sure.
Just like you said, if there was a spot open, you see it in the movies all the time. But it is true. If there was a spot open, you wanted to go in there and you want to prove you belonged. And so that competitive nature there was so nice.
Yeah. And you don't want to be the right fielder every time. You want to play third or short, or be on the mound or the catcher, and you got to be good enough to be able to hold the position, don't you?
Absolutely, Harper. And you said it best about getting out there and going to different fields just right in front of the house. Unfortunately, nowadays everything for these kids is all organized, completely 100% organized. I have a little boy that lives across the street. He's like 7 years old. He is out in front of the house with his dad playing catch all the time. He's the only one I ever see in the neighborhoods anymore. And when Bob and I were growing up in Southern California, that's all you did. You were all over the streets.
Yep. Whatever the game was, you could have football, whatever. For me, Jim, it was when the street lights would go on when it was about to get dark. That meant that overtime needed to be done, and the world championship for that day had to be suspended because everybody's going to get yelled at if they didn't get home in the next 45 seconds to a minute and a half.
I'm with you 100%.
Yeah. And sometimes someone would have to yell, Anthony, and then all the Italian kids would go because they're all named Anthony, right? they had to disappear. But getting a chance to do all that, and then obviously going through elementary and then in high school, St. Bernard's High School, you're literally right off the end of the west side of the north of runway at LAX Airport. But smaller school, but yet nonetheless, great athletically. A lot of kids that would come out of there. Great basketball program. Not so much football because you didn't have a real genuine field on campus, but baseball especially, right? A lot of great players in your time.
Yes, it really was. In that whole area too. And like you said, with St. Bernard's High School, right next to the airport there, every 7 seconds a plane would take off. And so the teacher had to be quiet for a bit. So, I mean, you could literally, when the planes were just starting to take off, if you were flying, you could see that brick building, the shape of an H, and that is St. Bernard's High School. But throughout that South Bay area, and as I mentioned when we were talking a little earlier, Westchester High School was right across the street. And in that area, they had like 4 little leagues. There was a Babe Ruth, there was a Pony League. Baseball was the #1 sport. And there was a lot of kids from that area that went to those schools. Basketball was popular at that time, so was football. But baseball was kind of the key sport. And it was competitive. There were some very good players that came out of St. Bernard's over the years.
Yeah, and competitive not only at the school in order just to make the team and being good enough to be able to represent, but also in the area with the other teams. You mentioned the El Camino Real League. I grew up in the Del Rey League, and now it's a Mission League where a few of the Catholic schools in that area that are close enough to one another, they'd all be in the same region or same district together, play against each other. And so you really got a good view of how talented you were. And I think it would be easy if you were a scout trying to figure out, who's any good out there. to just follow that El Camino Real League, it would be one of many that you would want to scout and get to know the players and see who might be able to make it either at the collegiate or at the minor league level.
Oh gosh, 100%. And just in my senior at St. Bernard's, how I got noticed, we had a player on my team, high school team. His name was Mark Meschek. He was from El Segundo. And, El Segundo was so strong in those days,
Yep.
the Brett brothers, McCready, God, they were loaded. And so Mark came over. Anyway, Mark was a projected like number 2 or 3 pick. And we happened to be playing, remember the school, Sarah High School. And Sarah High School had a pitcher named Randy Hammond, who I think Randy got a cup of coffee in the major leagues. And so we were playing this game at Bishop Montgomery High School. There was 26 scouts there to see those 2 players. My friend Mark just didn't happen to have a great day. I came in about the 4th inning, and there was only 2 left, Gail Hindley and Jesse Flores. I think Bob knows Jesse.
I knew Gail. Gail was a great guy.
Yeah, Gail was outstanding.
Great guy.
So I got 2 of the old cards that you put all your information, come send them back in. Both of them called me. And from there, just by being, with my friend not having such a good day, I was seen that day. So that's kind of unique right there that I would have probably been going to some junior college if that day doesn't happen.
When is this, Jim? 67, 68?
This is 1969.
69. Okay. And you mentioned it's like a little index card, right? You got to fill it out and you got to have your number, your name, and nothing like what they do today. It's an old index card. And did you hand it in or did it have a self-addressed stamped envelope that you would send in?
They both had self-addressed, and they were called green cards. And it was just an information type of card. Yep. And so I sent them in. Jesse called probably about a week later, asked some questions. Gail Hindley called right after that. And, that's how the whole thing began.
Well, tell us about the process for you. Obviously, pitching at the high school level, what was your stuff? Was it just I had a great fastball, I had better control, I've got the ability to do a little bit of both? Did you have a slurve or some unusual pitch? Tell me what your strengths were. And to be candid, I want to know what some of the weaknesses were too, the things that they would say, hey, you really need to work on this, and you're going to have your arm strength developed over time if you start doing a few of these things, and we need to fine tune you so that you can play at the next level.
Yeah. I would say in high school, the best thing that I always had, my ball always moved pretty good. I had at that time what you just described as I probably had a slurve and, in a fastball, but I was not lucky, but I was just talented in the fact that my ball moved pretty good. I didn't throw as hard as my friend Mark that I had mentioned to you, but I had good movement, got a lot of ground balls, got my share of strikeouts and so on. So throughout that year, that just happened to be throwing a little bit harder, when we were playing Sarah that day with all the scouts there and everything. So it just, it went from there. I was not the greatest student in the whole world, so I always prayed I'd get drafted and possibly signed at that time. And when it came along where my high school, St. Bernard's, back in those days, I don't know if your guys did it, we used to go to Disneyland. They'd have the overnight as a grad night at Disneyland.
Yeah.
So I went to Disneyland. They had it open till 5 o'clock in the morning for you. Came home that day, and the LA Times used to put the whole draft in there. So I got home before anybody got up. I scoured the whole thing, every single thing. And the name Jim Hughes was not there. And I was crushed. So went to bed. My father woke me up probably about 9 o'clock and said, hey, there's some guy named Jesse Flores on the phone. And Jesse said that they had drafted me in the 35th round, and I had to go to Hart Park in Long Beach to sign a piece of paper that he had contacted me. And he said he'd be over in about a week, and we'd try to get the whole thing done. And from that day, you knew that Jesse Flores was just an outstanding person. So.
Wow. So the same day, of the draft is when you've got senior night, you got to go to Disneyland. And back in those days, right, you would only find out through the paper unless you got the phone call, of course, and that didn't come until after you were drafted. So a little bit of a disappointment turns into something. What was it like for you just to get that phone call and to be able to know I'm a member of the national, about the Major League Baseball right now, professional?
Well, obviously it's exciting, God, it's like every kid's. I think most kids that are in Little League, wherever, they always say, what do you want to do when you're older? Well, I want to be a pro baseball, but you don't even know what that is. You know what I mean? I did. I used to say it, but it ended up happening. And so I just think I think what was the best is just the possibility of having a chance, being the backup, but still being a pretty good pitcher. The only thing that I really had going for me at that time, Pierce Junior College in the Valley was very good. And I cannot think of the name of the head coach there, but he came to visit me at my house before that. And my dad and I took a ride out the 405 out to Pierce Junior College. And that ride was so long and the traffic wasn't bad. My dad was being real upbeat. Oh, this is nice out here. You like go to school. And I told myself, there's no way on earth I'm coming out here. I get the chance, I'm signing for a penny. So, that's the direction I took.
Well, you said that academics.
Wouldn't you say Jesse Flores was the most famous scout for the Twins back then?
Oh, easily in Southern California. When you look at the amount of guys he signed in my draft, Burt Blyleven, it was for Bill Soup Campbell. He got him. Jesse ran that Hart Park League, and it was back then. I don't know what it was called, but every team in Southern California, every major league team had a team in Southern California that worked out. And you could go out there, you could get 2 innings, you get 1 inning. Jesse and another guy named Ray King would stay out there, and they would get in 19 innings just to get everybody in a bat, just to give everybody a couple innings pitched. And it was just awesome of them. And one of the nicest, kindest men of all time. Bob probably knew him from his old Pacific Coast League days. He was a star.
It was Gail Henley was with the Hollywood Stars.
Yeah. So,
and the Pittsburgh Pirates. Did you know Gail played for the Pirates?
I did not. Yeah. I'm sure Jesse got some big league time too, right?
A couple of years.
Yeah. You froze.
We had some technical difficulties, at least over on my end. I hope everything is okay now. Please apologize for that. Jim, there's an adulation and excitement. Obviously, I asked you about the phone call and what that initially meant, and there's a joy and an adulation, as I said, but there's also now it's time to go to work. What was that like for you?
That was a lot of fun. First of all, Jesse Flores comes over to my house, and my dad was my agent. Of course, that's most of the way it was in those days. So anyway, Jesse sits down, said, we'd really like to sign Jim. There's a lot more potential there, that he said, than where he was drafted. And but so we're willing to give him a $5,000 bonus, and we'll pay for 8 semesters of school. And he looked at my dad and he said, what do you think? My dad says, no, we want $25,000. Well, Jesse used to wear this little hat. I thought Jesse's hat was going to blow up to the ceiling because his face got so red. So he basically said it's $5,000 in a very kind way, and the school. And so my dad said, we'll talk about it. As soon as he left, I said, Dad, I'm signing. And it was a done deal. So he said that we signed the contract a week later. He sent me plane information, tickets and everything. Went down to LAX airport. I flew National Airlines down to Melbourne, Florida. And sitting next to me is Burt Blyleven, who was drafted number 3 in that draft. Paul Ray Powell was number 1. Guy from Covina named Ronald McDonald was number 2, and Burt was number 3. And so we went down to Melbourne, Florida. Melbourne, Florida is the minor league complex, so it was at an airport back there at that time. Got off the plane, felt humidity for the first time, and then the next days just went to work in that hot, humid sun.
Yeah, absolutely. But the career starts. You guys had mentioned a few guys. I'm going to throw Jim Cott and then Lyman Bostock, and you mentioned Rod Carew. There were some really, really good players that the Twins
Tony
had.
Tony Oliva was one
They've been to the World Series, absolutely, Bob. In the mid '60s, they were always like one step away from having that dominant team, but the talent level was great. What was it like for you with that group of 34, 35 other guys that were a part of the draft, and finding and sorting out where everybody's going to be initially, going to the barracks, so to speak, having your workouts, and really getting your game together and thinking in a different way about, now I got to figure out ways to get these guys out because they're good. They're the best of the best.
Yeah, 100%. And that's what you get is, it's kind of a feel thing. You just go out there. I remember that going out that very next day, and back then you had those old wool uniforms, and being out there and just sweating like I've never sweated before. And Bert, I was out in the center field, and Bert was the first batting practice pitcher that day. And I saw that fastball and that curveball, and I just said to myself, oh boy, I'm in trouble. I mean, it was so, and when you're in high school, at the height I was 6'3", I was probably one of the tallest guys. But when you get to baseball and play all those guys are 6'3", 6'4", 6'5". So a little bit of that, you see more size than you see anything else. But slowly but surely, when you were pitching, you just, that added confidence, and, went over to Sarasota, Florida, where the league began. And, some of the guys back then used to go to those summer leagues. There was one up in Auburn. There was another one in the Northwest. So the collegiate kids would usually go to those summer leagues, whereas the rookies would stay in Sarasota. So it made it a little more even keel for you. And you know what? You just pretty soon you're pitching, and that thing just rings in your head. I can get this guy out, and I can get that guy out. You know what I mean? And the confidence builds. It also helped that we had a tremendous manager. His name was Freddie Waters, and he was an ex-Marine. He was a major league pitcher. He was a great guy. We all hated him at the beginning because he was a mean son of a gun, and we knew he was a Marine. But halfway through the year, you realize he's doing that for us. He was awesome. And he was a big part of my career, kind of teaching you how to practice in baseball. Nobody really thinks about that, but he really did. And he was a great guy. So he was the one that kind of pushed me and told me, hey, we got to teach you how to use your sinker, move and things like that. And so when I really felt at that time that I had an edge on those guys, what they did, they had 8 starters. It was going to be a rotation every 4 games, but one guy would start and pitch 5 innings. The other guy would go 6 through 9. If you messed up, they had a reliever coming in there. So being one of the top 8 on a pitching staff of probably 24, that gives you a little bit of a lift, just try to get better and stuff. So that's how it is. And one quick story, if you don't mind, Harper, there's so many kids there. And all these kids were tops on their baseball teams and stuff. When I was in that league, there was a guy that was drafted like number 6. And his first 3 games, he was one of those starters. First 3 games, the poor guy just got shelled. And in the 4th game, he got shelled again. He got taken out in the 1st inning. He went over in the corner, and he was just sitting there, had a small tear coming down his cheek. And Fred Waters went over and said to him, son, what's wrong with you? And he goes, Coach, I've never been hit like this in my whole life. In my whole life, I've never been hit like this. And Fred Waters said to him, son, do you remember when in high school, when that number 3 or 4 hitter would get a hit off you every once in a while? He goes, yeah. He said, son, they're all here now. And so for the rest of your career, when you go to A ball to AA, they're all going to be there and, and move on. And it really does. That's what baseball is about. You got to adjust. You can have great stuff, but you better be able to adjust or you're in big trouble.
You mentioned something that's very interesting to me. Hall of Famer Greg Maddux was asked, what was the hardest part of your pitching career, what level was it where you had the most challenging time with your stuff? He goes, oh, that was before I got to the Cubs. That was in high school. High school, the reporter says, how on earth could it be in high school? He goes, because they swing at everything. I couldn't throw anything past any of these guys. Now you get thinkers. You get guys that are waiting for a certain pitch. You have to learn as a pitcher what they're going to wait for and make sure that you don't throw it in the way that they want it, right? This is the cat and mouse game that takes place between a pitcher and a batter at a much higher, more significant level. Was that an easy thing for you to learn, or was that just something that I just got to throw my best stuff and then learn how to apply that in a different manner as Fred taught you?
Yeah, basically with Fred, that he said with that, he says your sinker, don't try to go corners, go in a little bit, because your movement's going to take it someplace else, which you learned. And for that, and I basically with the sinker, that was it. He actually taught me at that time a little bit more of a slider. When you hear about the true sliders, I'm sure you guys have had guests. If you can get that real tight football little spin on that ball, you're going to have a quick breaking slider. So he worked on that with me, because I had mentioned in high school I had a pretty good slurve, but he divided it in two. He taught me an overhand curveball in a slider that from that time, I just had to learn. I had to get the command for that. And you had also, Harper, asked me a little bit earlier, what was one of my downfalls? I never had the greatest control in the world. So I was constantly fighting that a little bit. So that was probably the biggest thing for myself. Where Maddox had such pinpoint control, everybody knew he was going to be around the plate. I was one of those guys with a ball one, ball two guy, 3-2 count and that stuff, just hoping that I could get that sinker or good slider over the plate.
Yeah, that's a challenge for everybody. I mean, how many Greg Maddoxes are there? Not many, right? There's only one of him, but there's not many that are like that. The control and being able to hit a spot that's not a strike, even though you want it to be, that's not easy to do. It's just not.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And when you like him, sorry to get off on this tangent, but like him, though, you get to be like Greg Maddox and you're throwing strike. Pretty soon that umpire is giving you that 2-inch off the corner just because he thinks it's going to be a strike himself. Yeah. Whereas you get a pitcher that's throwing ball, he's thinking the opposite. This kid will never throw a strike.
Yeah. Yeah. He can throw one right down the middle. I'll go, nope, you missed low, right? No, it's right down the middle. No, it wasn't. Take your base batter. Well, early on, because you didn't go to college, you're straight in you're riding buses, you're in cheap hotels or motels. What was the road like for you as a 18 or maybe early 19-year-old? You're away from home for the first time. It's hot and sweaty outside. You're with a bunch of guys that you've not really met, but you're brought together to be a team. You got to learn to trust this one and maybe not trust the other one because they want your job and want to take your place. But you're professionally playing baseball at the highest level, even if it's single, double, triple A, you're getting yourself ready for that. What was that experience like for you being away for the first time?
Just the very first year in Sarasota, Florida was more of a homesick thing. And, you had, like I'd mentioned earlier, you had anywhere, the guys were coming in, going and this and that. So you had anywhere between 26 to 32 guys. And everybody's homesick. They're all 17, 18 years old. That was the big thing. At that time, then, I don't ever really recall being jealous of anybody and this and that. At that time, I think everybody else was really just worried about themselves. You just want to do enough to get to the next level. So I didn't see that much there. But that was kind of it. It was a lot of fun. Most of the places that you stayed, they told us, they gave us the first night in a hotel, and then they gave us a list of different places you can go look for a place. And Bert Blyleven, a guy named Ken Knight, and a guy named Lee Pallas, we went and found a little hotel room with 4 beds that was $135 a month. And you know what? We had fun. We had a lot of fun. There was a Howard Johnson's down the block where all you could eat chicken on one night, all you could eat fish on the next night. and you were making about $500, and you made it work. $500 a month, and you made it work. But
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
homesick thing, Harper, was, I would say, at that age, was the biggest drawback.
And learning how to find all of those all-you-can-eat places so that you only have to eat one meal a day instead of paying for three. I think there's a truth to that as well. You really learn to budget in a different manner when you're counting pennies and your per diem money is a little bit late, right?
That's 100%. That was fun. What a learning experience. They'd say, okay, you got one night, go find a place. You're 17 years old, and that's what you do. It's a growing experience.
Yeah. Well, I've got a Tacoma Twins picture here. You started in Sarasota, Pacific Coast League. There's some pretty good baseball there, isn't there? A lot of really good athletes. Did you learn anything from that experience that said, you know what, I'm really close right now. I'm just one step away from where I need to be.
Yes, I did. And getting to the Pacific Coast League, I had a really good year in Lynchburg in 1972. I was 13-9. I think I led the league in ERA. Kirby Farrell was our manager at that time, and he had moved to AAA. And I really wanted to skip AA because the bus rides in that old Southern League were horrible. I was invited to this Major League spring training for the first time that year, and went and then got sent down, didn't make the team. And when I made that AAA, it was a blast. And I was on that team in 1963. I was the youngest guy on the team. Soup Campbell was on that team. Soup was 25. But back then in the PCL, there was a lot of veterans in that league. On our team was Charlie Manuel, Rick Rennick, really good ex-Major League player, Bob Gebhard, who was a Major League pitching coach, general manager, just great guys. It was older, and all the other teams were that way too. So now, you're not pitching against a lot of young hitters like in the Carolina League. You got a lot of experienced hitters who now they know how to set you up in those things. And so it was a lot of fun. And it was, all of a sudden you're in big cities, you're flying everywhere. It was a major good experience. Absolutely.
And then that was 73. You said you get called up in 74. Talk a little bit about, the season that you finish in the minors, and then finally you get an opportunity. I believe it was on the 14th of September. So it was in the end of the month. The season's nearly over, but you get brought up. What was that like for you in terms of getting that call and being told by your manager, hey, they want to bring you up now?
Well, I went to the ballpark that day. We're in Tacoma, the old Cheney Stadium. And so I pulled up in my car. I'm walking there, and there's our groundskeeper. His name is Scotty Ryan. Scotty was a great guy. You get to be friends with all those guys. You're around them constantly. Sure. And Scotty says, come here. I got a favor to ask. I go over and ask him. And Scotty says, hey, you can't tell anybody in the organization I told you this. He says, but you're going to the major leagues tomorrow. And I said, huh? He goes, shh. He's going, please, but you got to do me a favor. He says, I want Rod Carew autographs. You got to send that to me. And so I said, okay, but when you go into the clubhouse and Cal Irmer calls you in.
Hold on, Jim. Hold on. Did you tell Scotty, well, I want Rod Carew's autograph too?
So I walk in, Harper, into the clubhouse, and Cal Irmer comes out and says, Jim, can I talk to you for a minute? And, so you walk in, the whole story, and you want to look excited and stuff. So I had to fake a little. The excitement had already been through it. So it was all good. And he had mentioned that I was going to go to the big leagues. It was a Thursday night. The season was over. The Twins had started a series that was Labor Day weekend, and they had started the series in Kansas City. I flew Saturday night into Kansas City, went to the hotel, and nobody's there. I couldn't wait to see all my friends, the ones Bob mentioned earlier, Craig Kuzic, Glenn Morgan. They were all on a dove hunting expedition, Phil Roof. And so my first night in the big leagues was not the greatest night. Everybody was gone, but it was a lot of fun. So And then, just go to the ballpark next day in Kansas City. And when I was going back to my high school days, when I was a senior in high school, El Segundo, George Brett was a sophomore. Scotty McGregor was a sophomore. They had a real good pitcher. His last name was Helvey, I can't think, but they were a good team. So I had lost to El Segundo in the CIF playoffs there. And so hadn't seen George Brett since. So you just go out in the field and, there's George Brett, a few other guys, all those guys, because KC was just starting to get a good team. They just were putting the Hal McRae's, Amos Otis's, all those guys were come. And it was a nice feeling to see somebody you knew out in the field too.
Yeah. And then George obviously goes on to have a Hall of Fame career. Yeah. Things that you probably saw and recognized in him as a high school player. And now you see him, he's doing it. He looks the same. Maybe he's a little thicker, whatever, but he still had that. He wears his stirrups the same way, or, his haircut is similar. And then the swing. And you got to get him out, right? Him and all these other guys. There's work to do. When did you finally say, hey, kid, warm up, go get in the bullpen and get called up? I mean, actually go on the mound and be in a game.
I pitched a game. Gosh darn it. I pitched against Kansas City, and I didn't do very well. That was probably the September 14th, what you're talking about, against KC. I can't even remember how long. I probably don't want to remember how many innings I went, but I didn't do very well. And then the last game of the season, the Texas Rangers came into town, and they said, Jimmy, you're going to start Sunday, and you're going to pitch against Ferguson Jenkins. And so Ferguson Jenkins had 24 wins that year, going for his 25th.
Wow.
So, I was really excited. I went out there. I had a no-hitter for 5 innings. In the 6th inning that day, Ferguson Jenkins talked the manager into letting him hit because he always said he was a good hitter. So Fergie Jenkins comes up in the 6th inning and gets a base hit off me, ruins my no-hitter. Not only that, he gets on the bases and scores the first run. So I took the one hitter, I think, into the 8th inning. Tom Grieve comes up. Remember Tom, Bob? And Tom hit a blast to that old stadium. So it's 2-0. Harmon Killebrew hit a home run, 2-1. Anyway, I pitched a complete game, 3-hitter, lost to Ferguson Jenkins, 2-1. And that was the first time that I really felt, obviously it was a joy to make it, but I really felt like, hey, if I take care of myself, I can stay here. You know what I mean? Where you get that boost of confidence that I can stay here.
Yeah. Well, obviously the no-hitter going 5 into the 6th inning before Fergie gets on. Not bad. Good job, Rook. Right. And then you gave up a run there. Okay. All right. Fight your way out of it, Rook. And then you go in the 8th inning. Your ERA is 2, which isn't bad for anybody. But unfortunately, it wasn't enough to win that game. Right.
Correct.
That's the challenge. And Fergie's going, I didn't pitch well at all, and I still got to win, because I got two of the hits were the key to the game, just 2.
Yeah, he won his 25th that day.
Yeah, my goodness. Well, you had 25 in your career. That's pretty good, right?
Yeah, that's right.
You had 25. It's awesome.
I love it.
25 more than Bob and I had together. So
absolutely.
That's good. Talk about the ride while you're there. The airplanes, the checks are bigger. Do you think I'm going to spend it all? Are you going to save it all? Were you a little bit in between? I'm not asking you what you did with your money. I'm just saying there's some guys that learn to budget well. They're pretty conservative. They enjoy the life. They buy a nice suit to where they look good, but you know what? They're storing their money away. They don't want the game to leave them broke like so many do when they're finished.
Yeah. So I'll go back. In 1975, I made $16,500, which was the minimum. And
Yeah.
I was rich. And after having I won 16 games in 75, I was 16-14. And God, that year, there was a lot of good breakouts, taking a sidebar. Freddie Lynn came out, Jim Rice came out, Dennis Eckersley, Dennis Leonard. Boy, there was a lot of good rookies. And, Calvin Griffith, who I always liked, but he was a little on the cheaper side. Boy, I had to fight him. All those other guys were getting 40 and 50,000, and he wanted me to come in at the same amount. So I didn't have an agent at that time. So he used to call you into his office at Tinker Field there in Orlando, and he'd yell and scream at you, this and that, which was huge. And my best buddy Neil used to tell me at that time, never give him a price. He was going to law school. Don't tell him what you want until he gets around what you want. And so that's what I would do as a young kid all by myself. And he finally came, he got around 27,000, and I said, okay. And my friend told me to meet him halfway. And so I said, I want 32. And then Calvin said, oh, before this, you'll get a kick out of this, I think. Before this, Calvin Griffith told me how bad I was. You had all these walks. You had all this. He didn't mention one good thing. And no. I understand that's his job. You know what I mean?
He was the cheapest guy. He was the cheapest guy in baseball. You know that.
Yeah. And so anyway, he's telling me all this stuff. We come to the figure 29,500. So I am a happy camper. Wow. At that year, 29,500. So that night on the news, they're interviewing Calvin Griffith, and he goes, we have some great news. We signed Jim Hughes. This guy could be one of the best players to come, blah, 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 going on. Never once did he say that when he was tearing me apart, but boy, oh boy, he built me up after they signed me. So anyway, at the 29,000 was that year. And again, now I'm double rich. And so I was a saver. I always wanted my own house. So I saved a boatload of money. And after the season, I bought my first home in the city of Orange. No cars, no that, just wanted a house. So
wow. Good for you. Love hearing that. And it is a part of the negotiation process to where they tell you, I don't even know why. Was there a moment or two that you didn't even know why you were even on the team? They were ripping you up so bad. You can't do that. I don't like the way you tie your shoelaces. And when you blink, it just bugs me the crazy. And I don't like the way you inhale. And this is my offer. And that's the strategy, right? And then you go, well, wait a second. I won 16 games and I'm worth this. And that's what other players are getting. And they never wanted you to know what other players were making, especially guys on other teams.
Oh, 100%. And that's right about the time when a lot of that started coming out. I think arbitration, so numbers were told and stuff, which was valuable. But, like you said, Harper, when they start telling you how bad you are, you start going, But, I kind of had to figure what I wanted. I knew Minnesota, most of the time you took a little bit less. So at the end of the day, I was very happy. I think both parties were happy.
Well, hey, Jim, you mentioned when you won 16 games, you left out one thing, which especially in 2025, you had 13 complete games. You know what a rarity that is today? And you had a couple shutouts, I know. But, I mean, just a complete game is like a dinosaur, and he had 13 complete games with that 16-14 record.
Yeah. Well, Bob, back then it really was, you finished what you started. And, we had that year, Gene Mock was the manager in 76, and we had a guy named Tom Bergmeyer, and we had Sue Campbell, the lefty and the righty, and they were good, but you were given every opportunity to finish that game. And in the top of the ninth inning, the old saying that you hear out of every team, get that first guy out. That was your goal. You wanted to finish that game. And, I was one sidebar, if you don't mind, if you have time, what a good staff that was. I was lucky that I always had good managers. And that year that I won the 16th, we were playing the Yankees in Minnesota. It was the ninth inning. I was leading 9-1. And I walked two guys in a row. And Frank Quillis, he stands up on the steps. He's looking around. And then he put up his arm like, wait a second. And Lee Stang, the pitching coach, who is one of the greatest guys in the whole world, comes bebopping out to the mound. And when he gets out to the mound, he said, threw a few expletives at me. And he goes, basic, what the hell are you doing? I said, what do you mean? He goes, Jim, I was in the clubhouse. He said, I had a dish of vanilla ice cream. I was just putting the chocolate syrup on it. And Frank calls me, says there's an emergency. Will you get these two guys out so I could go back and eat my ice cream? And, that's the kind of guy he was. He wanted to settle me down more than yell at me. But, that was the greatest thing about that team. So,
he also was a 16-game winner with the Twins, Lee Stang. And he was only, 5'9", 5'10", little guy.
Yeah, little guy, great guy, good pitching coach. So.
You mentioned Minnesota home games against the Yankees there to finish the season. Minnesota in September can get pretty doggone cold, and it is cold in March and April. But do you use that to your advantage? Right?
Yeah.
Is that something that you?
Those stands, I must have been pitching that day because there's nobody in the stands.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's camera day, and they're all waiting outside. There's hundreds of thousands of fans waiting to get in there for that first look at the Twins in this particular year. The weather, obviously, but here's another thing. Near the end of the year, you're splitting time with the Twins are splitting time with the Vikings.
Yes.
The field's all torn up. Everything is a little bit different. I know the football players don't really care. They hate that the infield is in the middle of their field, and you hate that the cleat marks are in the middle of your field. And the Vikings are pretty doggone good back in those days. So what was that like having them share the building with you?
Really nothing ever bothered me, that part of it. The only thing is that, the Vikings were definitely number one, which was okay. But we had to play a couple 10 o'clock in the morning games just to get out of the way to make sure that the Viking crowd could get in and do that. And that's really the only thing that I can ever remember there. It was not a big deal. It was with the Vikings there. I think the Vikings first, Twins second. The city was vibrant. It was a very good sports town back then. Very good sports town. I think it still is, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
So,
well, they love their team. They love the T-Wolves. How they lost the North Stars, I still don't know. We'll try to figure that out. But yeah, it's a good sports town. You're right.
Yep.
And there's enough folks, that might cross over. There are Packer fans that will not leave Wisconsin wearing any sort of purple, but they're close enough. Just on the other side of the St. Elmo, is that it? The name of the lake? There's a big lake over there just on the other side of the border. And, they can come over and watch a professional game. The fan base and the city itself was growing. It was expanding so quickly back in those days.
Yeah, it's shocking still. Where the old Metropolitan Stadium was on a huge parking lot. Right next to it was the North Stars, the hockey arena. And that place was always full. I not being a Southern California guy and not being a big hockey fan back then, I was shocked when the North Stars left because that city loved them. Yeah. They must have got a lot of money. They went to Dallas, didn't they?
Yes, they did. Yeah.
Yeah.
For reasons we don't know. Quebec lost their team. Atlanta here, they go up to Calgary and they win the cup. 2 or 3 years after they leave here. That's a different story for a different time.
Did you ever do any ice fishing in Minnesota?
I did.
How was that?
Bob, I'm sorry. I take that back. I'll put it this way. It was so cold, I thought it was ice. But Glenn Borgman and Craig Kuzik said, come on, we're going to go fish. We're taking you fishing. California guy, you never been fishing in the Midwest in your life. And I went out there, and those guys had the time of their life. My fishing career ended that day. I was so bored, but it was a lot of fun just being with those two guys because they were a lot of fun. But, everybody caught a fish but me, and it was just not my thing. But that ice fishing up there, when you saw pictures in the clubhouse of a lot of the players that had lived up there in those days, most of the players, when you go back to those early Harmon Killebrew, Bobby Allison, Earl Batty days, those guys stayed there because they could find jobs there and stuff. and they did everything, the ice fishing, and you'd see pictures all over the place of those guys doing things like that. And, with the Minnesota Twins of those 70s having the success they did, I think they lost to the Dodgers maybe 64-4-0. That was it. They had some good teams. They really did.
Yeah.
One thing about ice fishing, if you ask a true Minnesotan in the land of 10,000 lakes, how many vehicles are at the bottom of some of those lakes because the ice hasn't hardened enough to be able to support the weight of a guy that's too lazy to walk out and he wants to drive out. There's some bad incidences that take place every now and then.
Yeah,
I'm glad you weren't a part of that. In terms of the career, though, let's talk a little bit about, it starts to wane on you. I think 74, 75, 76, and then 77 kicks in. What was the writing on the wall for you going, I don't know how much longer this is going to last?
Oh, boy. Yeah, in spring training of 1976, we went to the Astrodome to play the Houston Astros. And Enos Cabell hit a line drive off the bottom of my foot, and it didn't break it, but it hit a nerve there. Oh my gosh! So I missed about the first month of the 76 season, and then when I started pitching, God, I started off 0-5 that year. Good news is at the end of the year, I started pitching better. I ended the season 9-14. The Twins, because I didn't have in 75, I had 250 innings. In 76, gosh, I'm lucky if I had 130, I'd say around there. So back then when they want you to go to winter ball, which I did, I went to Caracas, Venezuela. And when I went down there, I was horrible. I couldn't get anybody out. Things just, from the end of the season till then, it just kind of.
That was all from your foot, from that line.
No, I don't think it was from the foot, Bob. I just think through the course of that year, going to Venezuela, there's an old saying: you throw it just as hard, it just doesn't get there as fast. And that's kind of what happened to me. I got a little tendonitis at times. I got the shots, but I just didn't have that extra zip. That instead of being hitting it solid, or instead of being a foul ball, it's hit solid. More contact was starting to happen. And, up until that time, I always had less hits than innings pitched. That went a little above. The lack of really control hurt me a little bit.
But Jim, it wasn't a bad arm, though. It was you just lost it without a bad arm.
Yeah, I would say anything, guys. Over my career in the minors, if I had to do it all over again, when I first hurt my arm and got bad tendonitis in 1973, when did the Pirates win the World Series? They won like in
71.
Okay, 71. So I went to spring training that year, and there was a lockout that year too. Oh, they won this was 72. And I went down there not that good a shape, but I wanted to make the team. And they said, "Can you pitch?" And I said, "Absolutely, I'll pitch." And I pitched 3 innings against the Pirates and did really, really well. I couldn't lift my arm the next day. My back hurt, my arm hurt. And that was the first time I ever got a shot of cortisone. It took a long time for that to come back. And at that time, as I had mentioned earlier, I had a really good sinker, I had a really good slider, and I had a really good curveball. Well, the sinker stayed, the curveball stayed, but that slider was toast, gone, never came back. I could just never snap it off again. Even though my arm didn't hurt, I think there was a little weakness there that happened that hurt me a little bit. Anyway, in Caracas, I didn't pitch very well. I pitched, Pat Corrales was our manager. Oh, yeah. I started 3 or 4 games, and it just wasn't there. So I stayed the whole time down there and just never really got it back. And from there, I went to the Twins the next year. I made the team out of spring training. They kept me for about 2 months, went down to AAA, and it just never really came back. You have those dreams that'll just show up one morning, but just never happened. Never happened.
And you had the homesickness when you first are on the bus as a 18-year-old, maybe early 19-year-old. Was there any part of going to Caracas where the language barrier, or just being in another part of the world and not being comfortable, was that any way, shape, or form a part of what the problem was?
No, not at all. That was,
Okay.
when you play Caracas winter ball, there's, and at that time you're used to being away from home, but they call them imports, and there was 12 imports at a team. My wife and I at that time lived with Mick Kelleher and his wife, which was a lot of fun. We had a lot of nice guys on that team, and it was a lot of fun. And you go down there, you want to make a little extra money, you want to get the innings into that. And for me, it just didn't happen. For some of those other guys, it did. It just wasn't meant to be.
Well, you have a Twins and then a White Sox opportunity. There's Central and South America baseball. You're trying to find that mojo to get you back, but it just didn't happen for you in that manner, did it?
No. Yeah. As I had mentioned to you, when the Dodgers signed me, when I came back from that Inter-American League, okay, I had my moments. Again, mostly this time now I'm pitching with fastball, and I developed a pretty good changeup. And so I could get some outs, but I just wasn't that major league material. The Dodgers, at the following spring training, they sold me to Mexico City. Actually, when I was down there, number one, I had a lot of fun. Number two, I pitched pretty well for them, which was nice. And, over the years of playing in Venezuela, playing in, the Dominican Republic, and going to Mexico, I learned to speak a little bit of Spanish. And it was, those guys down there were good guys too. In Mexico City, there's only 3 imports on a game and on a team. You get to be friends with them. But slowly but surely, you get to know a lot of those guys. And, at the end of the day, everybody has the same dream. Even those guys, they want to make it to America. They want to make it to the big leagues sometimes. And you know what? The young kids ask you questions. So it was a lot of fun. I had a great career for me.
Well, we started with a Don McMahon story, and he ended up being a little bit of or maybe a large bit of a factor in your post-career move. What was the first thing that you were thinking when you knew that I'm not going to be on a roster this year for the first time in my adult life? And what was your what do I do now moment?
Yeah. Well, yeah, when you come home and you got that moment, like I had mentioned, first thing I said, I'll just finish my school, get a teacher's credential, and go coach someplace. And at the end of my first year, I went to Cal State Fullerton, where I was doing this. And there was the farm director for the Chicago Cubs. Help me out here, Bob, if you can. But I believe his name was Gordon Goldsberry. Do you remember that name?
Oh, yeah. He was the next pitcher in the big leagues.
Yes. And so Gordon, and he called me up and said, "Hey, Jim," he says, "would you like to be the pitching coach in the Auburn League for the Auburn Cubs?" So I said, "Sure." So that was my plan. I was finishing that up. Here we go. I could teach, go get a little baseball for those summer leagues, and come back. And I get a call late one night about maybe 9-10 o'clock, and it's Don McMahon. And he goes, "In the morning, I want you to call Frank Torrey. I got the job of the life for you." And that's how the whole thing started. So next morning, I called Frank Torrey. We set up a meeting, and he just asked me a bunch of questions and things like that. Frank sent out 2 guys to interview me, 3 days apart. And first guy comes out, interviewed me. I was a little nervous. I didn't think it went so well, but I thought I answered the question. Nice guy. Next guy comes out, the same thing, interviews me. He starts telling me why I wouldn't like the job. And part of the reason I wouldn't like the job is you're going to be in smelly locker rooms. You're going to do that. And it's like, I've done that my whole life, and so on. Anyway, to make a long story short, fast forwarding way up, both of those guys told Frank Torrey that I couldn't do the job. You need to hire somebody else. So Frank Torrey comes out a week later, and Bob knows him, Italian guy. He's tall and just cocky, but really nice guy. He said, Jim, he says, the guys at Rawlings didn't like you. He says, but my best friend in the world is Don McMahon. And he says, you can do this job. He says, Don says you can do it, so you got the job. That's exactly how it happened. And thank God for Don McMahon.
No kidding.
Hey, Harper, let me just tell you this. I watched Jim for years and years do that job, okay? He was like, when he would go down in the dugout or on the field, he was like the Pied Piper. The players would chase him around. They wanted gloves for their grandchildren, gloves for this, extra gloves, extra batting gloves. I remember Raul Mondesi had him give him 10,000 batting gloves, and Jim didn't know he was giving them out to the players and giving them out to the fans. But he was like constantly consumed by players. Can you get me this? Can you get me? I need a dozen Adirondack bats, but I want this on this and this. And I mean, it was hilarious. But he was amazingly good. He remembered every player. Every player knew him. Every player in the big leagues knew him on a first name basis. They really loved him. He was welcomed in every locker room, all 30 locker rooms. And, he had a great career, and he was a great, I used to love seeing the pictures like Tony Gwynn receiving his gold glove with Rawlings executive Jim Hughes giving him the glove. He was in a lot of those photos handing out the gold glove awards, which was,
yeah. Oh,
there's Trevor one right there. There's Jim. Who is that? Who is that, Jim?
Trevor Hoffman.
Oh, Trevor Hoffman,
yeah.
Hall of Famer. Yeah, great.
Yeah. Yeah, I found one for you, Jim.
Yeah, you lost weight, Jim. You were heavier there, I can see.
Yeah.
Jim, do me a favor. Tell our audience, more specifically, what it was that Frank Torrey and Don put together for you. The initial, you're not taking out the trash, but you're near the bottom of the barrel, starting out with the Rawlings Company. What specifically were you doing? And tell us, how this ended up becoming a great blessing in your life.
Oh gosh, just starting when Frank told me when I was walking out the door, he goes, Jim, don't say a word about this to anybody except your family for a week. And he goes, he had like 15 interviews set up and he didn't want it out that I had already got the job. So I said, okay. So he calls me the following week and he goes, hey, Jim, hey, you got the job. He says, you are starting on December 1st. And he goes, I'm sending you a ticket to Honolulu, Hawaii. You will be there for 10 days. And I said, huh? He goes, Jim, the winter meetings are in Honolulu, Hawaii. He says, you're going over there. They will last 6 days, but I'm giving you 4 days on your own. Just stay over there and vacation for a while. And I looked up to the skies and said, thank you, Lord. Can you imagine that? So while we were there in Hawaii, Frank sat me down. They used to have a thing back in the day. Everything was done in the lobby. And he used to say all the time, Jim, you got to work the lobby. You got to work the lobby. Meet the coaches, find out who the best players are, and this and that. And I was kind of lucky at that time because I wasn't that far away from my career that some of the general managers, farm directors, they still knew who I was. And like I said earlier, it still made me feel like I was part of the game. You get into it and it was good like that. So Frank, at that time, you had the booths, winter meeting booths would be set up. Minor league teams would come by. They would buy uniforms from you, just like you said earlier. They would order their baseballs for the season, catching gear and things like that. And before you know it, you're teaching yourself how to write up a set of baseball uniforms. You're teaching yourself how to order the different type of helmets and things like that. And all the time you're trying to find the best players out there, to be with Rawlings so you get that advertisement on TV. And, just like my baseball career, Harper and Bob at that time, when I signed all the way up until AAA, you never had a pitching coach. You had a manager. So you're basically on your own to learn the stuff you needed to know. I'd mentioned my first manager, Fred Waters. He was a pitcher, so I had a coach there. But Bob Gebhard was the first pitching coach I ever had, and he was good. And where I said that, you learn to take care of yourself. You learn how to make the right decision to take care of yourself. And it was the same thing with Rawlings. I just looked at it, and I said to myself, don't screw this up. The worst thing you can possibly do is not show up. Go to the ballpark, stand around, something's going to fall in your lap. And that's what I did. I was always there. Like Bob said, before you know it, somebody's asking you for something. Somebody else sees you and they know you. They said, hey, that guy looks like a good guy. My friend, Bert Blyleven was still playing at that time. Bert was with the Cleveland Indians, I believe, at that time. So you would go there. He'd welcome you. Pretty soon, everybody on that team welcomed you. You became a part of it. And I think that's what was really good about my career. I showed up. I was kind, nice, humble, and I did my job. It was as simple as that.
Hey, Harper, let me just tell you this. And I knew every big league equipment manager and a million big league ball players. I never, ever heard a negative word. They all called him Hugo. But they all loved him. The players loved him. He took care of them to whatever they wanted. If they wanted their glove fixed, he would take it in and have it restitched. If they wanted this, if they wanted that, whatever they wanted. Tim Wallach, didn't you say he used the same glove his whole career? And Jim had to keep repairing. Tim Wallach, who played like 14 or 15 years in the big leagues, wore the same glove his whole career. And Jim had to keep taking it in every couple of years and repairing it. It was hilarious. But
Harper, in Westchester, in that area, there was a little shoe store, and it was called La Tierra Bootery. And the owner of La Tierra Bootery was a guy named Ben Brucker. And gosh, I can't think of his, started with an H too, but just a great guy. So guys would come to me, even sometimes with other companies, because I got the name that I could fix these gloves. So all I would do, if it was a Rawlings guy, I would take the Rawlings glove to Ben Brucker. I don't know how he did it, but he would sew that thing, and guys would, Dwayne Murphy, Tim Wallach, Wade Boggs, he put years on those gloves for those guys. And I became their hero because they didn't know Ben Brucker. But on the Wilson guys, they would give it to me. I'd take them, whatever Ben would charge Rawlings, I would just make them pay. But it was something there. It was just an added service that I didn't have to do, but I did do, if that makes sense.
Hey, Harper, here's the best part. This is the funniest part. I always tell Jim, you're the most humble 16-game winner that I've ever met in my life. I've never hear him. Okay, now listen, there would be major league players he would deal with for like 10 or 12 years, right? And so they would talk to me about Jim Hughes, and I'd say, Jim had a really good career with the Twins, 116. They go, what? He played in the big leagues? So these guys he's dealing with, a lot of them never even knew he was a big league player. I mean, right. If I walked in, the first thing I'd say, when I played, I did this. But half these guys, the younger guys, the older guys knew them or played against them. But a lot of the younger breed, guys 15 years in the big leagues, didn't know their glove guy and their Rawlings guy. Now think about it. Rawlings handled baseballs, all the big league baseballs, all the gloves, the Adirondack bats. They made all the uniforms. I mean, they had baseball like it was Rawlings is baseball, So.
Yeah. But Harper, 1987, Rawlings did everything. We had the uniforms, the balls, the helmets. There wasn't an official glove at that time, but we were the unofficial official glove, because at some of those times, probably I would say as many as 70% of the players wore Rawlings gloves at one time. And but Bob's right. We really did a good job at Rawlings. That's everybody. The uniform makers, everybody did a good job.
Ted Sizemore, there were a lot of ex-players there. Ted Sizemore, wasn't he the president of Rawlings?
Yes. So as I had mentioned, Frank was there for 2 years when I got there. Frank left, and they hired Ted Sizemore. So, Ted, Rookie of the Year with the Dodgers in 1959. Great guy. And Ted came in. Ted was my boss for 25 years. My boss that now I was 40 years contractually, if you want to call that, with Rawlings. So I had Ted for 25, got him Mike Thompson, another great guy, for 15. And the greatest thing about that, for having those guys, we were friends, still friends. It's so nice to have relationships with that guy. Both guys very competitive. Both guys loved Rawlings. Both guys did anything for Rawlings, to make sure that brand stayed on the field. And all the years for Rawlings are probably our biggest advertisement was that 50% of the players on the opening day rosters wear Rawlings. That was huge. So that's more than all the glove companies combined. And we held it together all those years because, not because of me, but just because it was a great team that wanted that to happen.
Well, the Gold Glove, the heart of the hide, right? The
Right.
finest in the field, little things like that. I do have to ask you though, Jim. This is a picture of you, and you're wearing a Wilson glove. What the heck is going on, man? You didn't know any better, did you?
To this day, I still get comments about that. That is so funny. You know, it's like, this is a true story. I'm going to tell you. True story.
I'll take it down. I'll take it down.
Oh, go ahead. I'm fine with it. I went to spring training. Now, on 1974, I pitched the 3-hit shutout that I lost 2-1. And I go back to spring training the next year. And I said, oh boy, I'll get a Rawlings glove contract for sure this year. That's one of your big dreams, you know, making it, all these little things in between. So I go up to the guy. I met him later. I can't remember his name. And I said, hey, are you giving out any contracts? And he goes, yeah, we're going to give out a few. He says, what's your name? And he looks on the list. I saw the list where my name's not there. And I'm crushed. I saw some other names and I'm thinking, God, I'm better than that guy. So I went and got Bob's buddy, Ray Crump. And I said, Ray, can you come out here and put a pretty good word in for me? Little did I know is Ray is probably the one that didn't put my name on the list. And he goes, Jim, I can't help you there. I said, okay. So I gave up that dream. And the next day, Wilson Sporting Goods comes, a guy named Gene DeCoste. Bob probably knows that name. And I was on Gene's list, and he gave me a 2-year Wilson contract. And, you know, they weren't bad, but they weren't the Rawlings glove. I wanted that glove. And you had mentioned, this sounds horrible saying this because I hate it when the guys do it to me, but Lyman Bostock had a Rawlings glove contract and did not like the Rawlings gloves. He liked Wilson. I had a Wilson contract and didn't like it. So Lyman would get me a pitcher's glove and I would get him an outfielder's glove, and it was all good. But
that reminds me, they had contracts in those days.
Yes.
Jim knows the story. Mike Schmidt was contracted to Adirondack bats, Rawlings bats, and they always had a red stripe because whatever team, if he was on the Dodgers, it was a blue stripe. If he was on the Phillies, it was a red stripe. Well, he was using block letter Louisville Sluggers, and he would get red tape and put it where the red stripe is. So when he's on TV, they think he's using a Rawlings bat because it had red tape around it. And then there was a famous story about some ball. Jim knows certain players, big names, which we won't mention, had Mizuno gloves, and they'd have a Rawlings tag. Remember that, Jim?
Yep.
Sold on the glove, sold over the Mizuno thing. So they'd actually be using a Mizuno glove, but on TV you'd see the Rawlings label there. They sold over the glove,
or vice versa.
Yeah.
And Jim, I'm sure you had a very sharp eye and would recognize that. Would you mind if I told one quick story? I'm in training camp in Philadelphia. I'm with the Eagles. I'm new to the team. We're in the middle of 2 days. It's late in August. I'm rooming with a linebacker from Baylor. I can't remember his name. Great dude. Just we had a lot of fun. And I decide to skip lunch that day. I go straight to my room. We take the traditional 45-minute nap, and then we got to get ready for practice. Well, I roll over. It's time to get up, and my roommate's not there. He walks in a couple seconds later, and he's got a box that's as big as anything that you couldn't even put on a plane if you were going to carry it with you. And it's full of Adidas shoes and shirts and pullovers and polos and he's Christmas. He's Santa Claus. He's so happy. I go, where'd you get that? And he goes, the Adidas guy. He was at lunch. You should have seen it. Everyone was mobbing him. I got the guy's card from my roommate, and I said, hey, I had a meeting. I couldn't make it. Can I talk to you? He goes, no, I'm sold out. I don't have any more gear. I go, well, I'm going to keep your number. I made the team, and the week afterwards, the Eagles only gave 2 pairs of shoes away. They gave 1 pair of turf, or one pair of grass, or you can get one pair of grass or one pair of turf, or you can get two pairs. It didn't matter, but they weren't going to give you anything other than that. They're a very tight organization, and they are what they are. I call the Adidas guy up and I go, hey, I made the team. I'd like to talk to you. I want to wear your shoes. I've loved them ever since I was in high school. He goes, I'm sold out. I told you that. I can't do anything. But I made the team. You gave all this gear to my roommate, and I got nothing. I ended up having to work deals with Reggie White and Jerome Brown and try to get my stuff and I wanted to wear other gear. You get that all the time, don't you? You're smiling. You go, yeah, it sucks being.
Everybody. I mean, hey, Harper, I had friends, and they'd have twins, a boy and a girl. And so as a birthday gift, Jim would say, what's their names? The girl's name, let's say it was Linda, and the boy's name was Joe. He would have a pink glove, a little kid's glove, pink, with Linda embroidered on it, and a blue glove for the boy with Joe embroidered on it. I'd give them for birthday gifts. I mean, that was so great. Those people love that stuff. You know, I mean, he was like, you know, amazing.
Yeah.
But, you know, Harper, the greatest thing about that was normally when you did those little baby gloves for players and things like that, is that the wives would love it more than the player when they got it home. And it was so nice for a player to come back and say, oh, God, Jim, my wife loved it. Usually went up on the mantle or something like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Bob's right. That was a great gift. And, you know, sometimes I even look at my career with Rawlings and I'll just say what a lucky person I was. And I call myself the controlled Santa Claus because I had a lot of good stuff to give away. You know, everybody likes Santa Claus. You just have to make sure you control it to keep your job.
Oh, absolutely. But the thing that captures not only my curiosity, but my respect for you, Jim, is the way that you went the extra mile and got little Joe or little Sally or Susan and Mom excited about what you did because you went a little bit extra. You didn't go an extra mile. It was a small price to pay to have somebody embroider the name. They do it for the guys all the time. And now with the color schemes and everybody want to personalize their glove, it's almost as if that is a standard practice today, isn't it? It's a lot different than years ago. I mean, you might put the guy's name on it, but now there's all kinds of messaging and other things that are part of making players happy and keeping the relationship with them.
Oh gosh, 100%. You know, back in the day when we were saying in like 1982 through probably the late 80s and that, those boxes of gloves that I would tell you about, they were one color, that old traditional tan color. Black came in a little bit later, but you would go out to spring training. The guys would come out and they would go through the gloves and Ryan Sandberg would say, Jim, here's my two, you know, and we're good to go. And then you'd always check on them constantly during the season to make sure they broke in right or whatever.
Yeah.
But now fast forward all the way to now, is we're going through the contracts. I'm helping the guy that overtook my job. And all the glove orders I'll say 80% of the glove orders will be done online by January 15th, because they can go onto the Rawlings website, build their glove. When they're all done, there's a little thing called the configurator number. They send it to Stevie, he turns it in, it's done. And it's multi-colors, you know, it's, you know, the traditional old, you get a lot of the players now, young players, you can see if their dads played sometimes, because they do want that traditional heart of the hide tan color, which is still our best leather, in my opinion.
Sure.
But yeah, it's changed a lot.
Recently, there was a series of YouTube videos that Trevor Bauer, while he was trying to put his career together after the incident that he had with the Dodgers, and he was in Japan, and he's doing these videos, and he's in a baseball store in Japan, and he's going to buy gloves, and he says to himself, he goes, oh, I wonder if I can get this one, because there's rules against certain colors on my team and in our league that we can't have a certain color. I mean, it's so expanded now. You used to have just a choice between tan or maybe a darker glove.
Yep.
And then the black gloves came into vogue. And next thing you know, they're team colors and pink gloves and you name it. So really the expansion has probably been a marketing blessing, but also a nightmare in that, gosh, I got to order enough pink leather to satisfy, but I don't know if there's going to be 100 guys that are going to order pink gloves or there's only going to be 5.
Yeah, 100%. That's the the inventory, that is so tough to do when you bring in all those colors. And, the thing that's happened now, you pay a lot more money for it, but you can order your glove online, even a little league kid, a high school kid, college, and build it the way they want. But when you start ordering those gloves, and you have to have your gloves ordered during the summer to get them at Christmas time, that's tough to have the inventory with all those different colors you want. Just as you said, if St. Bernard's High School is royal blue, that kid's probably not going to want a red glove there,
Nope.
and so,
Right.
yeah, it's really a struggle.
And I'm agreeing with you, Jim, but there also is the one kid that goes, I do want the red glove. I don't want to have the royal blue. So again, figuring all that out. And that's part of you and Sizemore and your other bosses. That's the configuration. I'm glad you guys were friends enough to be able to, how are we going to figure this out, Jim? And I don't know. How do I know what these kids are going to order? Nobody knows anymore, but you have to project for it and obviously have something that is of great value to them. You do that. Rawlings has always been the name, the brand, the association, and their connection with baseball. And you got to be a part of it for basically the entirety of your life.
Yeah. And, Harper, I'll grab it real quick. But the one constant in all those years was that label. That was for a Gold Glove. That one there is for a Gold Glove player. But, we had the traditional red one. They never changed it, which is, to me, was one of the smartest things they do. Other companies were changing label colors, doing that. So that was always on TV, from the grandpas of many years ago to their dads, to their kids. That red label means a lot to a lot of kids.
Yep. So, and then this one, I don't know if you can see that well enough. That
I do.
The Rawlings got kind of beat up there. My son hit a foul ball, and I got to find it, and it is a part of the game and the history of it that many people recognize. I know, Bob, you certainly do. You were a part of that in the baseball world. 50% of everything you did had something to do with Rawlings, didn't it?
I can remember when I was 10 years old, I bought my first glove. Everybody can remember their first glove. And I was a porky kid, so I was a catcher. So I got a Stan Lopata catcher's glove. And it was Rawlings, and it was a round pancake with a hole in the middle. And now they're like first baseman's glove, the catcher's gloves. And I remember when I was catching, I used to put a sponge in here, which I don't see him do anymore,
right?
Because I was catching a fastball, and you had to catch it right in the hole. It couldn't hit the top part of the glove. It was like a pancake, and it was completely different than the gloves. That was my first glove, Stan Lopata catcher's glove. I'll never forget it. Jim, do you remember your first glove?
Oh, I do. Harper, do we have time?
Please, go right ahead.
Oh, so my first glove, I had my brother's hand-me-downs, which was okay. So when I was 12 years old, my dad said, come on, we're going to go. He said there was an ex-policeman named Phil, and there was a sporting goods store on Manchester and Westchester. It was called Sportsville. He said, we're going to go down there and get you a glove. Now, so this is 1963. Again, I'm 12 years old. So we go down there, and there was a Mickey Mantle glove for $14. The thing was awesome. There was a Spalding Roger Maris glove for $12. And so my dad's coming over looking at both gloves, and he goes, which one you want? I said, oh, the Mickey Mantle Rawlings. He goes, no. He said, Jim, you got to take the Roger Maris. He says, $2 is a lot of money.
Oh,
said,
Dad.
No, I still have that Roger Maris glove. But I would have loved to have the Mickey Mantle glove. And,
of course.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. But he did let me buy a Mickey Mantle Louisville Slugger bat, but I missed out on the glove.
A 27 or a 29 back in those days?
Oh gosh, right? I'm going to say that was probably a 29 or 30.
Okay. Age. Yeah, 12. You're probably just moving up. Yeah, everyone had a 27 in Little League. Can I share my quick first glove story?
Sure.
My friend Stephen Tomich says, Harper, let's go play hockey. I love hockey. You love hockey. Go tell your dad, here's what's involved, and let's do this. So my dad comes home. He was an airline pilot. He was home that day. He didn't have a flight. Dad, I want to play hockey. You do? Well, what does that involve? Well, I'll tell you. Skates, shin guards, I need shoulder pads, forearm pads. I need a helmet. I need a mouth protector. I need a face mask. I need 2 sticks in case one breaks. I need skates. I need practice gear. I need game gear. And oh, by the way, Dad, I want to be a goalie. So I'm going to need goalie pads, and I'm going to need a chest protector, and I'm going to need a face mask and a glove and a waffle glove, and I'm going to need a stick. And oh, by the way, practice is at 5:30 in the morning on Saturday, and it's down in Culver City, down at the only rink. Dad, let's do this. And he says, get in the truck. I'll be out there in 3 minutes. I got to go to the bathroom. Like, meet me in the truck. So I go out in the truck. I'm waiting. I'm like a puppy wagging his tail, looking out the window. What he did is he told my mom that he's going to take me to Big 5 Sporting Goods. And he did. It was down in the valley off of Van Nuys Boulevard. And we go in Big 5. And I go inside. I'm slightly ahead of him. And I look, and it says hockey. And I go to my left, and I feel the shepherd's hook of his hand go right around my neck. And he takes me over to where the baseball section is. He said, pick out a glove and a bat and a ball. And I never want to hear about hockey again. So I got a glove and a bat and a red, white, and blue Rawlings glove. I've never seen one before or since. And somewhere or another, I left it out on the street when we were playing, wiffle ball or the tennis ball game that you ever have. And I don't have my red, white, and blue, and you don't have your Mickey Mantle glove. So we each have our Rawlings Day of Sorrow, right? We have we have to pay tribute to the death of a childhood dream.
But they make for good memories, which is nice.
They're great memories. And thank you for giving me a moment of your time to share it. I appreciate that.
Not a problem.
Well, Jim, you're semi-retired. You're not officially full-time with Rawlings right now, but anyways, the vice president of professional baseball is certainly a nice place to be. But tell us where you are right now, if you don't mind.
Oh gosh, just in my life, I get up every morning. Bob knows me. Bob calls me Ozzy, from Ozzy and Harriet. He said, Jim, he used to tease me. He said, Jim, when I get older, I want to be like you. I want to be like Ozzy and Harriet. So I don't do a whole lot. I keep myself busy. I get up every morning. Right now, I'm on the phone with Rawlings from about 5 to 6. We get it done early. My buddy, who I took the job from me, he lives back east, get that done. I go for an hour and a half walk, come back, get stuff done during the day, and whatever comes up, I do it. My grandson Micah and my granddaughter Nora, they're 8 and 10. They're both into sports, so a lot of my weekends are heading up to Westchester where they live, seeing soccer, basketball, the flag football, baseball. It's a lot of fun. It's definitely a lot of fun.
Well, I'm assuming that being called Ozzy is a compliment, because really the only bad thing that ever happened is Eddie Haskell would come over and give the boys a hard time.
That's right. Yeah, that is funny. Bob.
That's Leave It to Beaver. I get it. I know I've got the wrong show, but you know what I'm saying. It's,
100%. I get it. It is so true. Gosh.
But the great thing about Ozzy knows a lot of the great stories, and I can think of his roommate and friend Craig Cusick, and that's all I have to say. He knows these stories about the old days, and that's what's hilarious. That he keeps them buried in him with our secret stories. But he's Ozzy Nelson, and he's been happily married to his beautiful wife Ann for years. They have a wonderful family, and I respect the hell out of that.
Well, thanks, Bob. Harper, the first time I went to Bob's house, Bob, he knew I grew up big Yankee fan. Mickey Mantle, loved him back in those days. And Bob invited me over to his house. He had a Mickey Mantle jersey back then, the old flannel one. Oh gosh, was that thing sweet. And then he kind of showed me his collection. Well, we became good friends. So Bob and I used to meet on Saturday mornings sometimes at 6 o'clock. We meet at this little restaurant out in Van Nuys. Bob, was it called the Clock or the Tick Clock? And
yeah, it was. Yep.
Yeah, and we would go across the street. There was a bakery there. We'd either meet at I'd say once a month. And Harper, I would say we would laugh for 2 hours and part our own ways.
Absolutely. You know what Milton Berle said? He said, laughing is like going on instant vacation. And, there's nothing better to me than having friends, like old friends, especially that Jim and I have a zillion things we could laugh about. All I have to do is say one word, one name, Clevenhagen, or one word. We can just laugh and laugh. And they're private things, but they bring, some of them will bring tears to my face. You know, if I say Mike Henneman, I mean, the things will bring tears to your face. You know what I mean? I mean, just some fun stories. And that's what life's about, laughing, having fun. You know, who wants to be, I didn't get sober all those years ago to go around and be straight-faced and dour. I got sober to have fun and laugh and enjoy life, you know. That's why I like this show. There's not any guests. We even had Reggie smiling. You know, there's not any guests we haven't had on here that they're not laughing. You know?
Well, all I can say is thanks for having me, Harper. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm glad I got to meet you.
Well, thank you. I want to say one of the great tributes I got was from Dave Baker, who was a part of the NFL Hall of Fame, the building itself and running that. And when a player dies, he has to be at the funeral. He's a representative of the Hall of Fame. And his line was, "For all that you've done for the game, for all that you will do for the game, thank you." And I want to say that especially to you, Jim, for all that you've done, your career, whether it be at St. Bernard's or the minor leagues, going through the majors, fighting your way every day for a job and staying in that game as long as you can, and then devoting the rest of your adult life to making other players and even their wives one little bit happier and supplying them with what they need so that they can do their craft, and doing it with the quality and with the expertise that Rawlings has for years. There's a travel team just down the road. My son was asked to play for a Rawlings Tigers team that was here locally, and they do things first class as well. So thank you for all that you've done to promote and to enhance and to grow the game of baseball.
Well, thank you very much. It's truly been a pleasure being on with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Well, Bob, you've got some great friends, and we had another one on, and Jim Hughes being that. Jim had
another A-lister.
Yep, absolutely. Certainly a part of baseball's past from the 60s and 70s, and then getting a career with Rawlings and being able to move forward as a vice president to do so many wonderful things, not only to help the company, but to help major league players and be the Pied Piper, as you said, Bob. It's an amazing thing to watch how many guys become little kids and they go, "Oh, I need a glove. Oh, I need to have your bats. I need to get all this stuff. And I get a deal with you so that I can be represented by it," because it's such an amazing part of the game, whether it's a shoe deal or a glove deal, a bat deal, it doesn't matter. You're a part of that. And it makes the game even more fun and better to enjoy and to watch. So thank you, Jim Hughes. We appreciate you for being on the sports page with Bob. Wow. Case. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks again, Bob. Thank you again, Harper. It was a pleasure meeting you. And Bob, I'll see you over at Gelson's one of these Saturdays.
Yeah, Bob's big boy.
There you go. Get the fries and a milkshake. Well, we want to thank you for tuning in, everybody, on 100 Yards of Football. Occasionally, we get one of these wonderful guests that we get a chance to go down memory lane and do so in a manner where it sparks some interest in everybody that got their first glove, or whether it be a chance at doing something amazing in their personal lives, and the way sports allows for people to connect. So for Bob Case, for Jim Hughes, I'm Harper LaBelle saying